Hi, I'm Miriam Joy and welcome to my studio. We're going to do a fun class today, so let's get started. So for this project we're going to be using caulking, and I'm using Dab, the Alex Plus. You want to make sure this is white. And I pick mine up at Walmart. This is under $2 usually. And how I know it, because some of those get so mixed in, the last numbers are 101. So that is what I use. I also use an easy caulking gun. This makes it so much easier to use and to load over the other ones. I also use a frosting tip cover. This is kind of a newer thing. I purchased that at Hobby Lobby, and I can put that on the end and save it. And also my clippers. I just clip the ends off of the caulking with that, and then that makes it really easy to do, and we're ready to go. We're going to start by putting our caulking. You can use an old plastic container. The nice thing about it is if you have a bunch of them, you can throw them away. If you want to reuse it, just soak it and reuse it. Now you can decide how much you want to do. I never do more than half of my gun. That way I can hold on to them, and that's easier to use. We've got the dog running scared in here. He's scared of his shadow. I'm going to be using Rose. I love this color. I think this is a really pretty color. And we're going to be using food coloring. The reason is, I want to show you the rose color here. How pretty that is. I like that color. And the reason we're using food coloring is it doesn't change our consistency of our frosting. If you add paints, it takes a lot of paint, and then it changes the consistency of the caulking. And I will probably refer to it as frosting. So if that's okay, if I refer to the frosting, that's what I'm talking about, is the caulking. Make sure you have the white, not the clear. And we're just going to use an old butter knife. I get them at my thrift store. Don't mix your stuff that we use for this with your kitchen stuff. Anything that's done in this project, keep for craft purposes only. Don't mix them back and forth. So we're going to stir this real good. And remember, the color gets darker as it dries. So it may not look that dark, but it's going to get darker. And if you have streaks of white through it or streaks of color through it, that's okay too. So we're going to work on a rose. And this is the hardest of all when you're using the faux frosting or the caulking. And I'm going to be using a flower nail. I put some double-sided tape on there and some wax paper squares or parchment paper. And I took my caulking after I mixed the color in, and I put it into the refrigerator for about 5 minutes. I found that this hardens up a little bit, just enough to kind of hold the shape. Otherwise, it kind of looks like it's melting with the caulking. I've tried lots of different ways to harden it up, and for me, that works the best. You don't want to leave it in there too long. Now, if I had more caulking in there, I would probably do longer, but you don't want it so cold that it's not workable either. And I've even frozen it. I've forgotten it and left it in there and it's frozen. So it does freeze. So there's a lot of different theories or thoughts on that. You can do it whatever works best for you, but this is what works for me. So I'm going to be using a 103 rose petal tip from Wilton, and this is just the size I'm using. You can use bigger, you can use smaller, that's up to you. I went online and I looked at a lot of different videos on how to do frosted roses, and especially with this technique, we've got the little ribbon roses and different things like that, which I really like working with, but I want some bigger roses. So I'm going to start with my tip out, and we're going to put a base down. So go on YouTube and look on how to make roses. And there's lots of different videos out there. So I'm going to do 3 of these, one right on top of another, and we're just getting height. Now, if you had time to do this ahead of time, this would be better to let that dry and get nice and secure. Now, on the very top, we're going to come in here and we're just going to put our rose. You can see how wiggly it is, so it would be easier to do it if you left it for a while and let it harden up. And then I'm going to do 3 petals across that tip. 1, 2, 3. Now, last night I wasn't having such a hard time with this wiggling as much, but my base may have not been as high. So now I'm probably going to do 4 or 5 petals. Now, because this is different, we're doing things different than you would with regular frosting. It's just a different beast. And I am bringing my petals up and over. And I know why it's different than yesterday is because I have a bigger tip on today than I had yesterday. So I have 4 there and 5. That is looking really good. But I think the trick would be to do the base first and let it dry. And that's going to take several hours to let it dry all the way. Usually what I do is I do that the evening before and let it dry. But building the rose up like we did instead of doing it just flat is the key to really making these look nice. I've been looking and looking at different videos, and this has been the best help so far. So make sure you go and watch videos. And we're just going to start doing petals. We do a petal, we push as we're going up and over, up and over, up and over. And I think I'm going to try to get one more petal in here. And you can see I'm starting to warm up a little bit, but isn't that really pretty? You could, if you have a nail, more than one flower nail, you could let this dry, stand it up, and that's the reason they have the nail, so you can stick it in things and let it dry. I oftentimes put it in my brush holder and let it dry. There's also the scissors that you can pick them up and move them with. So there's a lot of different ways to do that. But that is basically how to make a rose. Now, if you're doing more than a couple, you might divide your bag of frosting into 2 different bags. Keep one in the freezer, do a rose or 2 till it starts to soften on you, and then trade it off and go do the other one, and that way you've always got a colder one. Don't leave it in the freezer too long, but that way you've got a cooler one all the time. Once your roses have dried, we're going to put some pigment powder on them, and it's going to take, these have set overnight. They're still probably not dry in the middle, if you can see that, but they're dry enough to go ahead and put this on. Sometimes by taking these bigger ones off and flipping them upside down, that can get dry, so that's something to know. Now, once our roses are dry, we're going to put some pigment powder. This is Pearl X, and you can find Pearl X in the scrapbooking section at your local craft store. BlueWhaleArts.com also has them. This is number 684. It's flamingo pink. It goes really well with the rose color, and I love it. You don't have to do this step, but what it does is it gives that shine to the roses, and I think that just really sets them off and makes them come alive, and I really like that a lot, and I think that looks really good. So I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to trim anything that needs to be trimmed on the roses. Now you can do 1 leaf, 2 leaves like our little ribbon guys, or you can do 1, 2, and 3. It kind of depends on what you're using them for, and I'm going to be doing 2. If I was doing it single by itself, I would do 3 roses, or 3 leaves, and so that really is up to you and the project that you're doing them on. The reason that we do them ahead of time, though, is because they can bleed onto our other caulking, especially if we're working with white, if it is wet. So that's the kind of the reasoning behind that. This guy is lopsided here, so we're going to remove that. So you can really clean those up with the scissors. That is what is so wonderful about this. Unlike regular frosting, you can't do anything with it once it's done. So if we have one, I'm trying to decide which one I would want. If I did 3 leaves, we'll do 3 on this one. I'm going to be using a leaf tip. This is a Wilton 70, and it's nice and wide. So we want a real big tip there with wide. So we want to think about where it will fit under the flower as well. So I'm going to do there and there, and I could have used a little bit wider on my wax paper, but if it gets over on the tray, it'll come off. That's not a big issue. And we're going to squeeze and push and pull. The bigger ones are harder on those tips to get them pointed there, and you can always pull that down if you want to get up underneath there too, and push and pull. And there you have your 3 leaves on the rose. Let's do 2 now. So I want to do 2 on this guy, and I'm going to put him down here to kind of fix this area. Push, and if you want to kind of make them a little bit back and forth, that kind of gives them a little bit more life there. And push and pull, and that is the 2. So you want them kind of in a V shape coming out, and if you want to just do the 1, that is fine too. Let's see where I'd put the 1 at if I just did the 1, and I'd probably want it a little bit more playful than if I just did the 2. So there is what the one looks like. We're going to let those dry, and then we're going to put some pigment powder on those. Once your leaves have dried on your roses, we're going to come back in with a green pigment powder or mica powder, and we're going to do our leaves just to give it that nice shine like the rest of the rose. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Check out all of our products at miriamjoy.com. Please give us a thumbs up and subscribe and share our videos so we can continue to bring you more. Thank you and God bless.